10 winters, he kept the same seat on the same cold bench, even on days when no one believed there was anything left to wait for. Snow gathered in the iron curls of the armrests. Trains came and went, freighters that groaned, commuter cars with doors. People crossed the platform without looking down. A few hands tossed crusts, a few feet shooed him aside. Mostly, the station forgot him. He was a brown dog once, though the brown had thinned to a rough grey. His ribs told the seasons. He kept his paws tucked beneath his chest. His eyes followed the same lines every day. The clock, the track, the corner where the wind always turned, like a reader tracing a sentence he could not stop repeating. At 1740, the station breathed differently. Air tightened, conversations clipped themselves shorter. The florist beside the stairs stopped tying ribbons and listened. The dog stood then, not asking for anything, only measuring the air with his nose, as though there were a particular scent that time owed him. When the train slowed, brakes writing their thin script along the rails, he stepped forward 2 paces, then sat again. He never crossed the yellow line. "Poor thing," the florist said to no one in particular. She sold carnations and forget-me-nots. She had given the dog a different name every spring, none stayed. Names slid from him like water. Fayboy noticed. Leo was young enough not to hurry and old enough to see that adults often did. He brought the dog a slice of bread the first day, then a heel of cheese, then a ritual, arriving 5 minutes before the 1740, sitting on the opposite end of the bench, tapping his toes to a rhythm trains know. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said after the 2nd week, and after the 5th, as if promises to work properly needed practice. The station had its rumors. Some said the dog had been left on a Sunday by a family that never returned. Others swore a conductor once fed him sausage every morning, and one morning did not. A man who knew everything about schedules knew nothing about this. "Dogs wander," he declared, "and then settle wherever scraps are." But the dog did not wander. He orbitated. His world was a circle mapped from bench to clock, to line to trash bin and back, a compass of habits with the needle frozen toward the track. On his collar, a leather strap gone soft, a strip of faded blue cloth was knotted into a tired bow. It looked like a sky that had forgotten how to be bright. The wind carried coal and coffee, wet wool and newsprint. Sometimes it brought a sound the dog recognized deeper than hunger, a whistle down the valley, the kind that slips under doors. When it came, he lifted his head and closed his eyes as if memory like fragrance worked better in the dark. Winter had turned the platform varnished and careful. Salt crackled under shoes. A light above the clock flickered between minutes. The boy stayed late. The 1740 was on time. The dog rose. He took his 2 paces, sat. The train coasted, aligned its doors with the painted numbers. People stepped off carrying their evenings. Leo watched the dog not watch them. The doors chimed, then closed. The train pulled away, leaving a ribbon of warmth that vanished as soon as it was felt. Snow began again, precise. Tomorrow, Leo thought, and the word felt like a coin in his pocket, light with an edge. The next day, the dog was already there when Leo arrived. The platform glowed with that pale, unfinished light of late afternoon, half sun, half iron. Vendors folded their awnings, and the florist swept petals that had outlived their color. The dog lifted his head as the broom passed, not wary, not curious, simply acknowledging that another day had almost reached its appointed hour. At 1735, the routine stirred itself awake. The same gust of wind slipped along the platform. The same metallic scent of oil and rails rose from below. The dog stood, shook his coat, and looked down the track as though reading a horizon invisible to everyone else. The station clock ticked. Its hands pointed toward the promise he believed in. Leo had brought him something better than bread, half a sausage stolen from his own dinner. The dog sniffed, ate, then sat again, his ears tilted forward. "You know, you could leave," Leo said. "There's a park, real grass, other dogs." The dog blinked slowly, as if politeness required a pause before ignoring advice. When the 5:40 train thundered in, brakes squealing, Leo felt the bench tremble beneath his legs. The doors slid open. Steam drifted like tired breath. The dog stood and stared at the doorway, the same one every time, 3rd carriage from the front. For a moment his body leaned forward, caught between instinct and disbelief. Then he sat again. The passengers spilled out, none of them the one he wanted. The florist crossed her arms and watched from her booth. "Still here," she murmured. "Maybe he's waiting for God. Or for someone who owes him a bone," a porter joked, wiping his hands on a rag. They laughed, but softly. Even mockery seemed to require respect. When the train left, Leo remained a while longer. The air felt emptier after movement. The dog circled once, lay down, and pressed his muzzle against the cold wood of the bench. The boy reached out and touched the blue ribbon on his collar. It was frayed, almost part of the leather now. "I'll come back tomorrow," he whispered. He did, and the next day, and the one after that. The season slid forward, melting its snow, revealing old cigarette butts and last year's leaves. The platform smelled of rust and lilac. Commuters began to recognize Leo too, the boy with the dog who waited. Some smiled when they passed. Others dropped coins near the animal as if his patience were a kind of performance art. The florist started leaving him scraps from her lunch. The rumor of his faithfulness spread like weather. Once a photographer arrived. He crouched, adjusted his lens, and captured the scene, the dog sitting solemnly beneath the clock, the boy beside him, the rails glinting like veins under sunlight. The photo appeared in the local paper with a headline too simple to be wrong: "The Dog Who Waits." After that, strangers came just to see him. Some tried to pet him. He tolerated it without interest. A woman with a heavy accent offered to take him home. The florist shook her head. "He already has one," she said. "It's just late." Late became a kind of time in itself. The dog understood the rhythm of the station better than any conductor. The way the air changed before a train arrived, the sequence of announcements, the lull after departure. His eyes followed the same stretch of rail, always toward the west, where light dimmed the fastest. One evening, Leo noticed something different. The dog hesitated before standing. His front paw trembled, a small limp almost unnoticeable. "You're getting old," Leo said, trying to sound casual, but the words fell like snow, quiet, irreversible. The 540 approached, its whistle sharp as a memory. The dog raised his head, ears twitching. Passengers leaned forward, impatient to board. Leo watched the animal watching the train. Steam brushed his fur, and for a heartbeat it seemed the blue ribbon fluttered brighter, like a signal sent from another world. Then the train left again, and the platform returned to silence. The boy felt the cold through his shoes. He bent down and whispered, "Tomorrow," though he wasn't sure who he was promising anymore. The dog closed his eyes, and in the distance a whistle faded, soft, almost human, fading into night. By early spring, the snow surrendered to puddles that mirrored the station roof like dull silver. Moss crawled between the bricks, and the walls exhaled the damp smell of thawed metal. The dog still kept his bench, though the ground beneath it had softened into mud. He sat anyway, patient as ever, eyes narrowed against the light that now slanted longer through the glass panes. Leo arrived after school, backpack half open, a book sticking out like an untidy wing. "You'll like this," he said, setting down a sandwich. "Ham today." The dog sniffed, then ate, crumbs clinging to his muzzle. When he finished, he looked toward the tracks again. Always that direction, west, toward the place the sun fell and the trains vanished. Leo followed his gaze. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked softly. He'd asked before, but this time something in the air seemed to invite an answer. Of course none came, only the distant hum of engines, the clatter of boots across wet stone. Inside the florist's booth, a radio murmured an old tune. She hummed along while trimming stems, glancing often toward the bench. Sometimes she wondered if the dog heard the music and remembered something. Sometimes she wondered if he was music, an unfinished note looping back on itself. That evening, as the 540 rolled in, a gust of wind swept through the station, scattering petals across the platform. One petal landed on the dog's head. He didn't blink. His attention locked on the open door of the third carriage, the same one every time. For a second, his tail twitched, then stilled. A man stepped down, not young, not old, carrying a suitcase and fatigue. The dog rose sharply, heart visible in the movement. The man looked at him just for a heartbeat, and then walked away. The dog watched until he vanished beyond the gate. Leo had seen it too. "You thought it was him, didn't you?" he whispered. The dog sank back onto his haunches. If disappointment had a sound, it was the train departing. The next day, rain returned, not the gentle kind, but a drumming that filled every hollow. The dog was soaked by the time Leo reached him. "You can come with me," the boy pleaded, tugging at the leash he'd brought. The animal resisted with quiet strength, like an idea refusing to change. "Fine," Leo sighed, "but at least sit under the awning." He coaxed until the dog moved halfway, enough to keep the rain from his eyes. From the ticket office, the clerk watched. "That mutt's going to drown out there," he muttered. "He won't leave," the florist said without looking up. "He'll leave when hunger wins." But hunger never did. Later, when the rain thinned to mist, Leo noticed the ribbon again. Its color, once dull, now looked darker, like wet sky. He traced the frayed edges with his fingers. "This belonged to someone, didn't it?" he murmured. The dog didn't move, but his breathing deepened as if the boy had touched more than fabric. That night, Leo dreamed of a station without people, only the sound of trains looping endlessly. In the dream, the dog was young, bounding beside a man in a long coat. The man laughed, tossed something blue into the air. Then the whistle screamed, and the scene broke apart like glass. He woke before dawn and ran to the station. The platform was empty except for the dog, sitting exactly where he always sat, dew glimmering on his fur. The sight felt both comforting and wrong, as if the world had forgotten to advance. "Morning," Leo said, breathless. The dog tilted his head. The first train of the day screamed down the line, scattering birds into the pale sky. For an instant, the echo of its whistle blended with memory. Sharp, distant, familiar. By summer, the dog's patience had turned into a kind of landmark. People gave directions, using him as a compass. Take the road past the waiting dog, then left at the bakery. Tourists paused for photographs. Children threw him bits of pastry and called him lucky, though luck had long passed him by. Only Leo and the florist still called him nothing, as if names might disturb whatever sacred thread kept him tethered to that bench. Heat shimmered over the tracks. The 5:40 train arrived coughing steam, its whistle less sharp in the thick air. The dog rose with the same grace as always, stiff legs unfolding like creased pages. He stepped forward, ears alert, watching the third carriage door open. Commuters spilled out. Office workers, a woman balancing flowers, a man with too many bags. The dog's eyes scanned faces until they blurred into one continuous absence. When the doors closed, he lowered himself again, breath shallow in the heat. Leo waved from across the platform, still in his school uniform, hair sticking to his forehead. "You're going to cook out here," he said, placing a bowl of water by the bench. The dog lapped quietly. "They're talking about closing the old part of the station," Leo went on. "Building something new. Apartments, maybe." The dog didn't react, but Leo's voice faltered. "You'd have to find another spot," the florist overheard. "They've been saying that for years," she said. "They'll paint over the cracks and call it restoration." She smiled, though her eyes stayed on the dog. Some things outlast plans. But time, like the trains, kept its schedule. Workers appeared one morning to repaint the platform numbers. The smell of fresh tar filled the air. They power-washed the walls, erased the stains that had become part of memory. When they reached the bench, one of them hesitated. "Should we move him?" The foreman shrugged. "If he bites, call the shelter." They painted around him. Days folded into weeks. The rhythm of arrivals and departures dulled, swallowed by construction noise and the laughter of tourists. The dog's presence became background. A painting hung too long in the same hallway. People passed without seeing him, their eyes trained on their phones, their conversations floating above the world. Even Leo noticed fewer looks of recognition when he stopped by. The legend was fading, like ink left in sun. One evening, a storm brewed from the east. The sky dimmed early, turning the metal rails into dark veins. Thunder trembled through the station roof. The dog shifted but did not seek shelter. Lightning flickered, illuminating him against the bench like an old photograph. Grayscale, solemn, enduring. The florist shouted from her booth, "Come inside, you foolish creature!" He turned his head once politely, then back to the tracks. The whistle of the 540 broke through rain as the train arrived, spraying mist in every direction. Passengers hurried past him, coats whipping. He stayed. Leo came running, soaked through. "You'll catch your death!" he cried, throwing his jacket over the dog. The animal blinked, water streaming down his face. For the briefest instant when the thunder rolled, Leo thought he saw another figure beside him. A man in uniform, hand resting gently on the dog's back. Then it was gone, swallowed by the flash. The storm lasted an hour. The waiting lasted still. By dawn, puddles mirrored a sky scrubbed clean. The town moved on. The shelter van pulled up 2 days later, but the driver took one look at the calm creature on the bench and drove away without stepping out. In September, the first leaves fell onto the bench. The florist closed her booth early. Leo started high school. Life adjusted its clocks. Yet every evening at 5:40 the sound of the train found him, the dog who remembered what no one else did. Autumn brought a gentler kind of quiet. The tourists were gone, the vendors packed their stalls, and the platform belonged again to its regular ghosts. Leaves drifted along the tracks like burnt letters. The dog's fur had grown duller, more the color of ash than earth. He still stood when the 540 approached, though slower now, his paws spreading slightly to keep balance, as the air trembled with the weight of the train. One afternoon, Leo arrived breathless, a folded newspaper clutched in his hand. "They printed it again," he said, kneeling beside the bench. On the front page was that same photograph, the dog beneath the clock, steam curling around his silhouette. The headline changed only slightly. "Still waiting." "They said you're a symbol of loyalty," Leo continued, half proud, half sad. "People love stories like yours. Makes them feel less alone." The dog sniffed the paper once, then looked away, unimpressed by fame. The world could name him 100 things, and none of them would be the one he wanted to hear. The florist came out from her booth, wiping her hands on her apron. "Symbols don't eat much," she said softly, placing a small dish of stew near the bench. "But stories need feeding too." She patted the dog's head, then nodded to Leo. "Your father would have liked him." Leo didn't answer. The mention of his father always made the air heavier. He traced the blue ribbon tied to the collar, nearly unraveled now, but still holding. He had begun to suspect it wasn't just decoration. "Where did you get this?" he murmured. The dog's gaze remained on the horizon, unflinching. That evening, Leo wandered into the old maintenance building behind the station, a place of dust and forgotten tools. He wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity, like the rails, runs in straight lines. In the corner, under a sheet of rusted tin, he found a wooden box. Inside lay old station records, tickets browned at the edges, and a stack of photographs, curled and fragile. One caught his eye, a younger version of the dog, standing proudly beside a man in a conductor's uniform. The man's cap tilted, his hand resting on the animal's head. Both looked directly at the camera, as if aware that this would be the moment that survived them. Leo turned the photo over. Written on the back in a hand both firm and hurried, "Otto and Rex, 1915. He whispered the names aloud, and the syllables seemed to stir the air. Otto. Rex. The dog had a name, after all, one that time had buried. When he returned to the platform, the dog was there, as always, eyes half closed in the amber glow of sunset. Leo knelt and held the photograph out. "Is this you?" he asked. The dog's nostrils flared. He pressed his nose to the picture, then to Leo's hand. It felt like confirmation, but also farewell. The boy showed the florist the photo the next day. She wiped her glasses and squinted. "Otto Kraus," she read. "That was before my time, but my mother used to talk about him. Said he drove the westbound line during the war. Brave man. Died in a wreck saving passengers, I think." Her voice trembled. And this must have been his dog. That night, Leo couldn't sleep. The story rearranged itself in his mind. The whistle, the third carriage, the ribbon. He imagined Otto stepping aboard one final time, promising he'd return. He imagined Rex waiting faithfully on the platform, watching smoke dissolve into distance. The years unspooled like rail lines behind him. The next morning, Leo brought the photograph back and pinned it to the wall inside the florist's booth. beside postcards and thank you notes. "He deserves to be remembered," he said. She nodded, eyes shining. Word spread again. A local historian came to verify the details, jotting in his notebook while Rex slept. "A dog waiting for a dead master. It's almost too perfect," the man said, smiling. "Tragedy always sells." Leo bristled. "It's not tragedy, it's loyalty." The man shrugged. "Loyalty is just tragedy with good manners." When he left, the station fell silent except for the ticking clock and the faint hum of rails cooling in the evening air. The boy sat on the bench beside the dog, their shadows stretching long and thin across the platform. "I know your name now," Leo whispered. "Rex." The dog stirred slightly, as if hearing a familiar word through layers of dream. A light rain began to fall, thin, tired drops that carried the scent of iron and leaves. The 5:40 arrived on schedule. The dog stood once more, his movements heavy but dignified, and faced the door of the third carriage. It opened to no one. He didn't seem disappointed, only certain. Leo watched him with a heart too full for speech. Tomorrow, he thought again. But the word no longer meant hope. It meant continuation, ritual, the quiet agreement between memory and time that neither will break first. Winter crept in quietly this time, without warning or ceremony. The air thinned, turning the station's breath to fog. Frost climbed the railings and glass panes, tracing delicate veins across the windows like handwriting from another age. The trains moved slower now, as if even steel respected the cold. Rex, the name now belonged to him again, lay curled beneath the bench when Leo arrived. Snowflakes gathered along his back, but melted quickly against the faint warmth of his fur. The boy brushed them away, his gloves stiff with cold. "Hey, old man," he murmured, "you can't keep doing this." Rex lifted his head. His eyes were cloudy, but their intent was unbroken. The 5:40 whistle echoed distantly, and instinct carried him to his feet. He limped now, one paw dragging slightly as he moved toward the platform's edge. Leo followed. "You still think he's coming, don't you?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Rex stopped 2 steps short of the yellow line and sat, tail curled tight. The whistle grew louder. Somewhere beneath the rumble, Leo imagined another sound, the voice of a man laughing, calling the dog's name through the steam. That night, Leo searched for records at the municipal archive. The clerk, an old man with nicotine fingers, adjusted his spectacles. "Kraus Otto," he repeated. "We have something, yes. Machinist, Western Line, 1915. Killed during an evacuation train fire. Dozens survived because he stayed at the brakes." Leo's stomach tightened. "Was there any mention of his dog?" The clerk smiled faintly. "No, but such things weren't written down back then. Only men get remembered by paper." Outside, the wind sliced across the streets, but Leo barely felt it. He held a copy of the report in his pocket, proof of loyalty written between the silences of history. When he returned to the station, Rex was still awake, his head resting on his paws, eyes reflecting the dim glow of the platform light. Leo sat beside him and read aloud from the page, voice trembling with reverence. Engineer Otto Kraus remained at the controls until the final moment, ensuring the safe escape of passengers before perishing in the explosion. The dog listened, or seemed to. When Leo stopped, Rex exhaled softly, nose pressed to the ground where the bench's shadow fell. The boy placed the paper under the bench, weighed it down with a stone. "He was brave," he whispered. "Like you." Days blurred into one another, a pale procession of grey mornings and blue evenings. The snow returned heavier. The florist closed her booth for the season, leaving a note taped to the glass. Back in March. The station looked abandoned, half asleep. Only the whistle marked the hours. One evening, Leo arrived later than usual. His breath came in clouds as he ran, boots slipping on the icy pavement. The train had already come and gone. The track still hummed with its passing. Rex was lying on his side near the bench, chest rising shallowly. "No, no, no." Leo knelt, pulling him upright. The dog blinked once, slowly, then looked toward the empty rails. "You don't have to wait anymore," Leo said. His throat ached. "He knows, I told him. You kept your promise." He didn't know if the words were true, but they felt necessary, like warmth invented for survival. The dog's gaze softened, distant. For a brief instant, Leo thought he saw recognition, something deep and final, as if a door had quietly opened inside those fading eyes. Then Rex lowered his head onto the boy's knee, the weight of years settling in one simple gesture. Snow began again, silent and endless. The clock above struck 5:40, each chime stretching longer than the last. The wind carried the faint echo of a train far away, its whistle trembling through the night. Rex's ears twitched once, and then stilled. Leo sat unmoving, hand resting on the dog's back. The sound faded, leaving only the hush of falling snow and the quiet certainty that some promises never really end. Morning found the world muted under a thick quilt of snow. The rails, the benches, even the clock above the platform were softened into shapes of memory. Leo sat where the dog used to sit, the same bench, the same angle facing the westbound line. His breath hung in clouds, dissolving into air that didn't care whether one waited or not. Rex had died during the night. Leo had stayed until dawn, unwilling to leave him alone in the cold. The florist came first, scarf pulled high against the wind. She stopped at the edge of the platform and pressed her hands to her mouth. "Oh no," she whispered. Together they carried the still body to the slope beyond the tracks, where frost-bleached grass poked through the snow. They dug with shovels borrowed from the maintenance shed, their silence broken only by the scraping of metal on frozen ground. When it was done, the florist set a single blue carnation on the mound. "He waited long enough," she said. Leo nodded, unable to trust his voice. He tied the frayed ribbon, the same one that had survived storms and summers, around a small wooden marker. Rex, it read in his careful handwriting. Underneath he carved one more word: loyalty. The station felt hollow afterward. The air lacked its familiar rhythm. Leo still came after school, at first out of habit, then out of something deeper, a reluctance to admit that waiting could end. He'd sit on the bench as the 5:40 approached, feeling the faint vibration crawl up through the metal rails. The whistle always made his heart jump, as though part of him still expected to see that brown head lift beside him. Passengers noticed the emptiness too. A few asked where the dog had gone. "Gone home," the florist would answer simply. For a while, people left flowers or notes near the bench. Some read "Thank you," others "We won't forget." But memory is as mortal as breath. By the time the snow melted, the letters had blurred, the papers torn by rain. One evening in late February, Leo met with the station master, a stern man with spectacles that magnified his doubt. "You're the boy who used to feed the dog," the man said. "There's talk of closing this platform. They want to move the monument, if you'd call it that." "It's not a monument," Leo replied. "It's his place." The man sighed. "Then you'd better think of something to make it official." So Leo did. He wrote a letter to the mayor, the paper, anyone who might listen. He attached the photograph of Otto and Rex, explained the story, the waiting, the faith that outlasted decades. The florist added her name. Soon others did too. Commuters, workers, even a few tourists who remembered taking pictures. By spring, the city council voted to preserve the bench and a small plaque in Rex's memory. On the first warm day of April, the unveiling took place. A crowd gathered, small but sincere. The plaque read, "Rex, the dog who waited." He kept a promise when the world forgot how. 1915, 1925. When the cloth was lifted, a hush passed through the onlookers. The 5:40 train whistled in the distance, right on time. Some swore the sound seemed softer that day, as if the train itself bowed in respect. Afterward, the florist closed her booth early, and Leo lingered alone on the platform. The bench gleamed with a fresh coat of varnish, but beneath it the old wood still held scratches from paws that once circled before resting. Leo reached out and touched them, tracing each groove with his fingertips. "See?" he whispered into the quiet. "You're part of the station now. You'll never have to wait alone again." A breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of lilacs and steel. For a moment, the air felt alive, like the space between two heartbeats when both memory and presence coexist. The whistle echoed once more, and Leo smiled, certain he had heard his name carried within it. The following winter returned early, sweeping in before the trees had finished shedding their leaves. The town seemed smaller beneath the weight of grey skies. Even the trains sounded tired, whistles stretched thinner, engines slower to warm. Leo was older now, taller, but something in his face had stayed the same, that quiet expectancy shaped by years of coming to this place. He still visited the bench every evening, even though Rex was gone. It had become a habit stitched into muscle, an unfinished sentence he couldn't stop reading. The plaque caught flakes of snow, and when he brushed them off, his fingertips felt the cold letters like a pulse. One evening, as darkness folded over the tracks, a notice appeared on the station board. Service change. Final run of the 540 westbound December 21st. After that, the line would close. The council had approved the new terminal farther down the valley. Progress, they called it. Leo read the sign 3 times before its meaning settled in. The train that Rex had waited for would come only once more. After that, the tracks would belong to silence. He found the florist the next morning. "They can't end it," he said, holding the paper in his trembling hands. "They can," she replied softly. "They already did." She was older too, her hair streaked with silver. "Perhaps it's right. Maybe it's time to let him rest." Leo stared past her booth to the bench, to the small mound beyond the rails. "He'll rest when the train stops coming," he said, "not before." The final day arrived under a sky the color of smoke. Crowds gathered, not commuters, but neighbors, children, reporters with cameras eager to capture nostalgia before it evaporated. The mayor made a speech about history and memory. Leo barely listened. He stood apart, coat collar turned up, snow dusting his hair. The 540 whistle came from far away at first, thin and trembling like a voice calling across years. The platform quieted. People removed their hats instinctively, the way they do in churches. Leo's heart thudded. He imagined Rex beside him, older, slower, yet standing proudly, head lifted toward the sound. The train emerged from the curve, its front lantern cutting through the haze. Steam rolled ahead of it, swirling across the platform like a ghost rehearsing its entrance. The brakes squealed, sparks blooming briefly beneath the wheels. Leo took a step forward. When the doors opened, no passengers stepped out. Only the conductor, solemn in his cap, nodded to the crowd. "End of the line," he announced. His voice carried an echo, weary but respectful. Leo looked down. Something small fluttered by his boots, a scrap of fabric caught in the wind. He bent and picked it up. It was blue, faded, nearly white, torn at one end, as if ripped long ago from a collar. His throat tightened. The crowd blurred around him. The sound of cameras clicking faded into a low hum. He turned toward the bench. For an instant, the snowlight shimmered strangely, shaping itself into a familiar outline. A dog sitting upright, tail curled neatly around its paws, gaze fixed on the open train doors. Leo blinked, and the shape dissolved, leaving only a swirl of snow spiraling where it had been. He walked to the edge of the platform and placed the ribbon gently on the rail. "You can stop waiting now," he whispered. He came back. The conductor blew the whistle one last time. Steam enveloped the station, wrapping everything in a shroud of warmth that vanished as quickly as it came. When the train began to move again, its wheels struck the track with a rhythm that felt almost alive, like footsteps fading down a long hallway. As the sound receded, Leo sat on the bench. Snow fell softly, covering the words, "The dog who waited." For a moment, the station seemed to breathe. The air trembled with something between ending and beginning, the fragile pause where memory decides whether to stay or to let go. Leo didn't move. He just listened, eyes closed, until the last echo of the whistle slipped into the wind, empty, gentle, and complete. Weeks passed, and the world resumed its usual noise. The station, once the heartbeat of the town, now stood still, rails rusting, the ticket booth shuttered, the clock above the platform forever frozen at 5:40. Without trains, the air had lost its pulse. Yet each evening, as dusk slid down the valley, Leo swore he could still hear a faint vibration running beneath the snow, like the memory of motion refusing to die. The florist's shop was gone too. She had retired, leaving a handwritten sign in the window. "Thank you for the seasons." Her booth, empty now, smelled faintly of lilies long faded. Leo passed it every day, heading to the platform out of habit. The bench was there, half buried in frost. The plaque glimmered under a thin layer of ice, its words softened but legible. He kept a promise when the world forgot how. He sat where he always had. The wind played along the wires overhead, imitating the distant whine of a train. Sometimes he could almost believe it was real. The slow build of sound, the imagined rush of air, the warmth of something returning. Memory is an echo, he thought. It never stops calling back to where it began. One afternoon, while clearing snow from the bench, Leo found something new, a small bunch of flowers laid carefully at the base of the plaque. They were fresh, violet and yellow, tied with a thin blue ribbon. He looked around, but the platform was empty, only footprints leading away toward the town. He crouched, fingertips brushing the petals. Whoever had left them knew the story. Maybe they had once seen the dog, or maybe they only believed in him. Either way, the offering warmed the cold air. He began keeping a journal after that. Short notes, small details. Snow again. The ribbon frozen stiff. Someone whistled from the road. It wasn't much, but it gave structure to his visits, a quiet ritual of observation and gratitude. In the margins, he sketched the outline of Rex, always the same posture, sitting, waiting, eyes on the horizon. He never colored them in. Something about leaving them unshaded felt more honest, as though the dog existed between worlds, part memory, part weather. The town changed around the silence. New shops opened near the main square. Children who'd once tossed crumbs at the old dog were now grown, too busy to remember. But sometimes, in the lull between conversation and traffic, a whistle would echo through the valley. A factory vent perhaps, or the wind, and every head would lift for a fraction of a second. They would glance toward the west, puzzled by nostalgia they didn't recognize before returning to their day. It was enough. Memory doesn't need belief, it only needs repetition. One evening, as Leo packed his notebook, a man approached from the path. He was middle-aged, carrying a camera bag. "Excuse me," he said, "I'm documenting forgotten places. They said this station has a story." Leo smiled faintly. "It does. About a dog." He nodded. "His name was Rex. He waited here for his master for 10 years. The man looked through the viewfinder, capturing the bench, the plaque, the outline of snow against rusted rails. "Do you still hear the train?" he asked, half joking. "Every day," Leo said simply. "Sometimes when the wind is right." The man laughed softly. "Maybe he's still around then. Maybe he never left." When the stranger departed, the platform fell quiet again. Twilight painted everything silver. Leo placed a hand on the bench, feeling the faint chill of metal seep into his skin. Somewhere beyond the hills, a sound rose. A low, distant whistle carried by the wind. It faded quickly, but not before he whispered back, "Good boy." The words vanished into the cold, but the air seemed to shiver with response. And for the briefest heartbeat, Leo thought he saw footprints in the snow beside him, leading toward the tracks, soft, deliberate, fading as the light disappeared. Years later, the station belonged to time more than to people. Weeds grew through cracks in the platform, rails red with rust. The clock still read 5:40, as if the day had chosen to pause forever. Birds nested where wires once hummed, and ivy climbed the sign that once said, "Westbound Line." Yet despite decay, the place remained strangely clean, as if wind and memory performed their quiet maintenance together. Leo returned less often now. Life had unfolded elsewhere, university, a job, a son named Daniel. But every winter, when snow returned to the valley, he felt the same pull, the same soft whisper at the edge of thought. Come back. So he did. Each visit began the same way. The crunch of frost under boots, the long breath before seeing the bench. It was smaller now, or maybe he had grown too tall to see it with boyish wonder. Daniel, 7 years old, ran ahead. "Is this the place?" he called. His voice echoed oddly, ricocheting off the empty roof beams. "This is it," Leo said. "Here's where he waited." "For 10 years?" "Yes," Leo smiled faintly. "Every day for the same train. He never gave up." The boy frowned. "But the train never came back, did it?" Leo hesitated. "Not the way he expected." Daniel traced a finger over the metal plaque, reading aloud the words his father had memorized decades ago. He kept a promise when the world forgot how. He looked up. Was he lonely? Maybe, Leo said. But sometimes waiting is its own kind of company. They sat together on the bench. The valley was still wrapped in pale sunlight. The old rails stretched westward into mist. Somewhere, deep beneath the silence, Leo felt the hum he'd always imagined, the faint tremor of something approaching or remembering how to. He wondered if his son could feel it too. "Dad," Daniel said after a while, "why do you come here?" Leo looked toward the mound beyond the tracks, where snow shaped itself into the familiar curve of a sleeping dog. "To listen," he said. "For what?" "The sound of faith." Daniel tilted his head. "Like church?" Leo laughed softly. "Something like that, only quieter." They walked across the platform. The florist's booth was gone, just a frame of wood and ghostly scent of petals. The town had long since built its new station miles away. Commuters there didn't know this place existed, or if they did, they called it Old Westbound and shrugged. But to Leo it was sacred ground, proof that devotion, once planted, could outlast even purpose. As the sun began to set, a low wind swept through the valley. It carried with it a note so pure, so exact, that Leo froze. Daniel heard it too. "Was that?" "Yes," Leo whispered. "A whistle." It came once, distant but clear, then again, longer, almost gentle. The sound drifted down the rails, filling the empty space between father and son. Leo's heart thudded with recognition. Every nerve remembered what his childhood ears had learned to expect. But there was no train, only air shimmering where tracks met horizon. Daniel grinned, eyes wide. "Maybe it's him." Leo smiled, though tears blurred the sky. "Maybe it is." The sound faded, leaving silence heavy and sweet. Snow began to fall, slow, deliberate flakes that seemed to move in rhythm with some hidden heartbeat. Leo knelt by the plaque, brushing off the frost. "Good boy," he said softly, and for a moment the air felt warm against his cheek like breath. He stood, taking his son's hand. "Come on," he said, "it's getting dark." As they walked away, the valley exhaled a final whisper, steel-meeting air, memory-meeting time, the faintest echo of a whistle rolling through distance. Daniel turned, eyes shining. "Dad, it's still going." Leo nodded. "Yes," he said. "Some promises never stop." And behind them, in the quiet of the old station, the bench waited, unchanged, eternal, listening to the sound of the train that never truly left.